Hello again, and welcome to the 12th episode of the Fat Feminist Witch podcast, the show where I do a little ranting, raving, and wand waving. Today I'm talking about all of the women that are left out of the popular triple goddess paradigm, and why that needs to change. I've also got a new sketchy herb and magic rock for you in my newest segment, and today's show is really dedicated to everyone who maybe never has a really good Mother's Day. So hi everybody, Paige here, the Fat Feminist Witch, and I officially have my first sunburn of the season. I was kind of excited about it until I realized I even burned a little, under my t-shirt. How's that even possible? So, we're definitely into spring now. The month of May is kind of a big deal for witches and pagans. It begins with the Celtic festival of Beltane, which is a favorite for party-loving pagans, and especially people who love bonfires and not wearing clothes and music and wine. You can see why Beltane's kind of a favorite. I, of course, spent it in sort of a public family setting with a maypole, and maypoles are cool too, so that was great. Of course, May is also the anniversary of the release of teen witch classic from the 90s, The Craft. This year was actually the 20th anniversary, which makes me feel like I'm going to throw up. And I live tweeted the whole thing, so if you're ever, looking for a laugh one afternoon, totally read that. And then, of course, there's Mother's Day. And this one is observed by people, no matter what their religion. It's observed by people all over the world, though not always at the same time. Unfortunately, not everybody's Mother's Day is filled with flowers and hugs and Hallmark cards. Sometimes it gets a little bit hairy. So some people don't really have a mother to speak of at all. Some people don't have a mother that's really worth celebrating, or that they talk to, or that wants to have anything to do with them. Somewhere out there, someone has just lost a child, been denied an adoption application, or found out that they're unable to have children. For some people, motherhood and Mother's Day doesn't really come with all of the warm and fuzzies that a lot of people associate with it. And I know, this isn't pagan, this isn't witchy, what are you talking about? But bear with me. So I recently reviewed a book on the blog called The Spiritual Feminist, and I gave it the lowest possible ranking that I could, which is 1 crystal ball out of 5. I think I covered it really well on the blog on thefatfeministwitch.com, so I'm not going to really re-review it here, but if you want to read it, check it out. I think I did a pretty good job. So among other problems that I had with the book, it really made me feel like the best reason women have to connect with each other is their reproductive organs. And this book isn't the first or only anything to make this kind of statement. This is a real problem in the pagan community and kind of the world in general. So you have lots of doulas, midwives, and the red tent movement. You have trans women that are excluded from pagan festivals and covens and circles. And then you have this seemingly empowering triple goddess archetype of maiden, mother, and crone. And all of these things say something about our pagan community that lets people know that we are still living in the dark ages, especially as far as feminism is concerned. So the triple goddess is a really popular idea in almost all neo-pagan traditions. The image of the goddess as the triptych depicting the physical and spiritual changes women and goddesses go through in their lifetime is a big deal. It's been around forever, and it's usually shown as phases of the moon, so waxing, full, and waning. You have specific goddesses that are attributed to it, so you have Artemis as your maiden, and Selene, or sometimes Demeter as your mother and your full moon, and you have Hecate as your crone. So the maiden stage is usually a time of your growth. This is youth. So this is around puberty, and it's associated with puberty, some youthful indiscretions, your education. You're a bit naive around this time, of course. This is usually marked, the most important event during this phase of your life will be menstruation, and your sexuality will start to kick on, thus some of those youthful indiscretions. But mostly and mainly virginity. This is your sacred virgin time. The mother stage is your time of fertility and stability and power. You also have your actual childbirth and motherhood. Some people think of this stage as the peak of a woman or goddess's life and the peak of their power. This is the stage where you've come into your own. The crone stage is usually marked by menopause, and this is your time of wisdom. And it's still marked with power, but it's a different power. It's kind of a darker power. Like I said, Hecate is the one that's associated with that. And she's like, she's the dark, creepy witch crone. Love that. Love the crone stage. And that begins with menopause. That's your physical change. For some, this system does something good. This allows women to see power in the physical things that happen in their bodies, whereas we're usually encouraged to feel shame. Periods and menstruation are still seen as kind of like a shameful thing that you don't talk about. And in that respect, I think that this does a lot of good, in the same way that I think red tent movements and all of that kind of stuff, that connection with your body's natural processes, are good for a lot of women, and they help people. But at the same time, it leaves people out. What about those of us who don't experience these markers, that don't kickstart that phase? Like, what about those of us who don't hit the phase at all? So women who never menstruate or have a lot of issues with menstruating, trans women who don't begin living openly as women until later in their lives, and then they have this previous life of experiences that's just completely left out of the narrative. And then there's women like me who aren't having any children. We aren't included in this paradigm. We're not there. In the same way that I think that the gender binary god energy and goddess energy in ritual is totally outdated, I believe that this is too. This archetype still makes virginity into a virtue. Even if it's not as obvious as it is in mainstream religions. Sexuality is usually very encouraged in pagan circles and in alternative spirituality in general. But it still marks this maiden time with virtuous virginity. Like I said, Diana or Artemis is the goddess that's usually associated with the maiden time. And Artemis is a virgin forever. Like, she's made a conscious decision to be celibate for life and to never have kids. And yet she's associated with like youth and like she should be our goddess, but she's like, no, it's virginity and it's so great. And isn't it great that she's a virgin? It's just gross. Virtuous virginity is a big problem. It's a problem in mainstream religions, and it's a problem here. This archetype allows many circles and covens, especially Dianic circles, Dianic Wicca circles, to exclude trans women just because they don't have the, quote, required anatomy, end quote, which is absolutely disgusting and wrong. It's disgusting and it's wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. If your narrative of what it means to be a woman and a feminist leaves out the experiences of trans women, you're leaving out the experiences of women just because you decide their experience isn't worth the same thing as yours. And that's just absolutely disgusting. That's disgusting. That's no different than saying, oh, only white women's experiences count as the experience of women. It's just not right. You're leaving out part of our community. You're leaving out other women. You're leaving out people. Their experiences matter, and their personal power matters, and they matter. Full stop. That's a big problem for me. This archetype also perpetuates the idea that the best decision for every woman, the thing that is going to make you live your best life and is going to make you so powerful and bring you into your own personal power, is having children. And it's not even like we're offered an alternative to that. It's not like, okay, well, you can either have children and do it that way, or you can do it this way, and you'll still get to crone either way. What the hell? Not only is that not an option for every woman, it's just not an option for everybody. But we finally live in a time and a place, or I do anyways. I live in North America, and I live in a time and a place where I am allowed to choose whether or not motherhood is the right option for me. Not everybody has that choice, but in North America, I do. And so the fact that pagan ritual and circle and everything still perpetuates this idea that that's the best way for me to go, even though that's not what I want and doesn't include me, is absolutely absurd. For me, the combination of a really difficult and painful relationship with my own mom and my family kind of losing the genetic lottery really forced me to consider if motherhood would be right for me at a really young age. And I decided that it wasn't. A genetic disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome runs in my family. And the type that we have is generally considered to be the scariest type. It's the worst type. It's called type 4 or vascular type. It affects, in general, it affects the collagen in your body. And for us, it affects our vascular system and kind of like the inner stuff. And having children can not only be incredibly painful and take lots of time to get better. Many of the women in my family have had to have hysterectomies. They go through menopause kind of early. Menopause is a huge problem. And for at least one woman in my family, having children was fatal. So when you combine that with some personal trauma that I experienced from a difficult childhood, having kids is so just not for me. Just not right for me. And that's totally okay. Now, for years, because of those things, I felt this huge disconnect from my body and from my identity as a woman, I guess. And so I was really grateful when I found stuff like red tents and natural menstrual products, and then even natural childbirth as this means of stop feeling ashamed of your body and to connect with who you are. I actually became a doula. I'm looking at my doula certificate right now. I went to New York City and I enrolled with ALICE, which is the Association of Labor Assistants and Childbirth Educators, although I think they've since changed their name. And I became a doula, and I was really excited about it, and I was very proud, and I still have all the books, and they're great. And then my not having a children really became a problem. I want to remind you that I was in my early 20s at this time. And I was not taken seriously as a doula because I didn't have children. And it's none of anyone's business why I didn't have children, especially in my early 20s, but it's none of anyone's business at all. And it's none of anyone's business whether or not I am having children or whether or not I can't or cannot have children. It's no one's business. But it was a problem. I wasn't taken seriously because I didn't have that personal experience of birth and motherhood. Last I checked, their male obstetricians hadn't pushed a baby out of their vagina. But hey. So I wasn't taken seriously as a doula because I didn't have children. And then I noticed I wasn't being taken seriously like as a woman either. I'm a childless woman who lives alone, and apparently that makes me like kind of wacky and silly. I don't like that. And my disconnection from quote unquote the goddess means I often haven't been taken seriously as a witch either. So I've actually had someone say to my face, I mean, how rude. You don't believe in the goddess? Well then, how are you a witch? And this is like a fellow pagan that said it, and I kind of wanted to slap her in the face. Kind of don't like her at all, but I really wanted to hit her at that moment. I'm never going to reach that mother stage. I'm never going to be there. But at 30 years old, I really struggle to see myself as a maiden. Especially because I don't want to be seen as a maiden. I'm so not a prepubescent girl or even a pubescent girl. Like, I'm an adult. I work super, super hard. I work 7 days a week and only get paid for like 2 of them. I accomplish so much all the time. I'm always working. I'm always doing new things. I nurture new ideas and new projects, and I'm well on my way into the peak of my own personal power. But I'm still not a mother, and I will never be a mother. That isn't my word, and it isn't something that I've earned or that I identify with. In fact, I actively do not ever want to be a mother. I don't even make jokes about being like my pet's mom or anything. That's just not who I am. So what, like, am I not a goddess now just because I don't have some sacred womb? I call total bullshit on that. Total bullshit. And I can't believe we still live in a time when that's a thing. How's that a thing? Do you guys ever watch John Oliver? How is this still a thing? This is the pagan version. I've been trying to think of a new phase because I actually read this book like a month ago, and I've been steaming about it ever since. And then Mother's Day kicked it all back up. I've been trying to think of a new phase that explains me, something that describes me, something that would allow me to belong. In that book, The Spiritual Feminist, one woman says that she mentions that she's in the Mabon phase of her life. And she says this is a phase that some women are adopting once their children have grown, but they're not quite in crone stage. I mean, maybe they haven't hit menopause, or maybe they don't feel like they're at that wisdom level, or, whatever. Whatever. We no longer live in a time when, women hit puberty, get married, have babies, and die in the span of 30 years. So 3 phases is just not enough. And I kind of liked that. I liked that there was this extra phase, it's autumn right before the winter. I thought that was clever. Still not usable to me. Still focuses entirely on motherhood. But hey, it was nice. I like that she and other women are taking that identity for themselves. Because I don't want to sound like I'm anti-mom or like anti-women having kids. If having kids is right for you, having kids is right for you. But I hate that there's no option for the rest of us. So I've been trying to come up with something else, something that would allow me to belong, but I've come up empty, and it's because I don't belong. I just keep feeling like I'm crashing a party. It sucks. It really sucks. And as I described in my Godless Heathens Secular Witchcraft episode, I felt very disconnected from deities and stuff, and considering how young I knew I wasn't going to have any kids, I really think that this particular archetype played a part in my disconnect from my faith for a really long time. So I think this triple goddess archetype really needs to be tweaked super hard. Or maybe it needs to be put out to pasture and replaced entirely with something that makes sense. Just like that unnecessary gendering of pagan ritual, paganism shouldn't be contributing this archaic idea that women need to have children, or need to have a uterus, or need to have anything that they don't want to in order to be powerful. So to all of those childless women out there, to women who aren't built the way maybe some people think you should have been, to women without some glowing magical womb or sacred blood, you're badass and you're magical, and you always have a place in my witchcraft. I always want to hear the experiences of other women, especially experiences that are so different from my own. I always want to hear the experiences of other witches and how they go through the world. Always. There's always a place for that. That is your own personal type of power, and everyone having the same experiences, the same story, the same type of energy is not the way the world is supposed to work. It's just not. And I feel like excluding a bunch of other people isn't the way to connect us as human beings. I don't need to have the same genitals as you, or reproductive organs, or physical experiences as you to relate to you as a human being. I don't need those things to, be magical with you. I don't need those things I don't need that stuff to connect with the planet and with, the divine, or whatever you want to call it. I don't need that. I honestly don't feel like I'm missing out by not having kids. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm kind of sad. I mean, this decision that I made is mine, but I wasn't given really great options, kind of a rock and a hard place situation. And sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm mourning the loss of a kid that is never going to exist, I guess. But in general, no. I'm just not. And it makes me sad that other women can't recognize me as, soul sister or whatever, just because of that. hurts my feelings, for lack of a better term. If I'm being a real 8-year-old about it, it hurts my feelings. It hurts my feelings to feel left out all the time from a community that I'm supposed to be a part of and have been a part of for 20 years. I don't know. That's something to think about. If you plan rituals or you lead a coven or something, think about this and think about why you stick to this archetype, this paradigm, and think about maybe if it's time for a shift. Okay. Whew. Let's all lighten the mood a little bit, guys. So let's go into our newest segment, Sketchy Herbs and Magic Rocks. So this week's sketchy, I just love it. It makes me laugh. So this week's sketchy herb was actually requested by someone on Instagram. Her name is Jane Claire Bradley on Instagram. And the herb she asked about is Calendula, otherwise known as marigold flowers, the little yellow, orange, and red flowers that are kind of the size of mums. I just added it to the list for a future episode. And then I came upon a reason to use calendula personally. So I was like, Jane Claire Bradley has got to be a little bit psychic there. She was really onto something. So calendula has amazing real world applications that I've been using for like 100 years. It's one of the best healing herbs ever. I have a salve that I make, and it's comfrey, calendula, plantain, St. John's wort, and lavender oil and beeswax. And this is the best healing salve ever. It's better than any sort of like commercially made situation. And I'm not just saying that because I like natural products. It's honestly just the best. And I used it for everything. I gave it to friends for diaper rash cream. I used it on bee stings to pull out the stings. I used it on rashes, on sunburns, on everything. Thanks to the calendula in there, it also helps with varicose veins. So because of that fun genetic situation I have, varicose veins are something I've had forever. And when I was using the salve, I'm actually out. When I was using the salve, my varicose veins were way less noticeable. So calendula is super cool for healing, and marigold flowers in their fresh form growing really help keep bugs away from your house and garden. A lot of people plant them all around their garden to keep bugs out, and they especially keep out ants. So if you have problems with ants, get some pots of little marigolds. Luckily, they're not super expensive, and put that outside your doors and anywhere the ants might be coming in, and they really help. But of course, none of this is sketchy or magical. So let's get into the fun, sketchy stuff. Calendula in magic is used for protection and prophetic dreams and good luck in legal matters. So putting marigolds around your house keeps evil spirits and entities out. And putting the petals under your bed or in dream pillows can help bring on prophetic dreams. Carrying marigolds with you is said to increase your respectability, and might even sway a verdict in your favor when you're in court. So calendula and marigold is used a lot of time for stuff like that. People will make an incense or a candle or something to burn before they go into a court proceeding to help them out with a little bit of extra luck. People like to put calendula in baths. And again, this is more to help your respectability and charisma in the bath. Bathing in calendula is supposed to let your inner light shine out, for lack of a better term, and to help you in communicating with other people. The reason I was using calendula is because I was making up an incense blend, and I was looking online for incense blends for a Santa Muerta incense. And I decided I wanted to make one, and I love Santa Muerta. Santa Muerta is, she's not sanctioned by the Catholic Church, but she is a saint, for lack of a better term, in Mexico, and she's kind of this saint or goddess of death. She's one of the ones that greet you there at the end. And I was looking for ingredients for her, and all the stuff I was seeing online was stuff like roses and lavender and vanilla, which doesn't sound horrible, but it sounds just like a cheesy love spell. None of that is very inherently Mexican. Aside from maybe the roses, it's not very much associated with the dead. So I decided to mix up my own. And as a base, I used marigolds as well as mullein. But marigold, or calendula especially, marigolds in Mexico are placed in graveyards, and then during the Day of the Dead, they're placed on altars. And they're not just on the altars, I mean, they're everywhere in these decorations, in the celebration. There are giant arches made entirely of marigold all throughout Mexican cities and towns during the Day of the Dead celebration. And the marigolds are said to be attractive both in sight and in smell to the good spirits, the spirits of their ancestors that they'd like to communicate with and that they're honoring around that time. So marigolds have this really pleasant, happy vibe that still deals with the dead in Mexico. And they have this added benefit of kind of keeping negative stuff away while attracting good stuff. So they attract your good spirits, your ancestors, and they keep all the icky stuff away from you, which really reinforces its use in protection. So when I went to make this incense, I naturally was like, oh yeah, I gotta have marigolds in there. So that's where I use the calendula a lot. That's what I think of marigolds all the time. So within this incense, I put, lots of calendula and then mullein as a base, because mullein is used to speak to the dead. And I added other stuff that has to do with the dead, like willow, because they grow in graveyards. I added dragon's blood and sandalwood, partly because they're red, no joke. They're red and blood and death. And then also copal resin, which is again burned during the Day of the Dead. It really matches in with the marigolds and it's a very Mexican smell. And I added some Palo Santo. So I made this very Central American inspired incense for Santa Muerta. And thanks to the calendula, it also helps with things like protection and dealing with legal matters, good luck in legal matters, and your own personal psychic power and stuff like that. And then some of the other stuff in there helps with things like prosperity and love and what have you. So it's still a multi-purpose incense. And the reason it's multi-purpose is because Santa Muerta is almost like a multi-purpose saint. She's kind of the patron saint of disenfranchised people. So people who are often left out of society, who live on the fringes of society, who don't live a very conventional lifestyle. So she's often thought of as the patron saint of the drug cartels, or bikers love Santa Muerta. You'll see a lot of Santa Muerta. She looks like a saint, but with the face of a skull there. You'll see her on a lot of like biker clothes and stuff like that, which is super cool. And a lot of times also LGBT people, trans people especially, lots of sex workers, lots of poor people, lots of people who have been just left out or kicked out, because she firmly believes that everyone deserves to be heard, especially near the end. So that is my favorite way to use calendula or marigold, is during Day of the Dead type celebrations. It's everywhere. Or if you are looking for a way to honor the dead or call in spirits of the dead or deal with Santa Muerta, calendula and marigold is great for that. But seriously, put it on your varicose veins. It'll help a lot. Great healing properties. Okay, so our magic rock. Our magic rock is Chrysocolla, or as I call it, it's the rich man's turquoise, which is pretty bad because turquoise is already really expensive. Chrysocolla, even more so. Chrysocolla is a bluish green stone. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And people mistake it for turquoise a lot, especially because it had a pretty prominent place in Native American jewelry. And it's used in Native American spirituality a lot. So a lot of people confuse the two, but there is definitely a difference. Chrysocolla is just a lot more blue. It's got a lot more of that dark blue. I chose this stone today because it's great for female empowerment, but it has nothing to do with your reproductive organs. So unlike something like moonstone that's good for women, it really helps. Moonstone really is for stuff like, PMS and childbirth. Chrysocolla is good for female empowerment, but it doesn't care about the physical stuff at all. It doesn't care about your reproductive organs. Chrysocola's greatest benefit is, I think anyways, other than how totally gorgeous it is, it really helps you deal with emotions like anger and depression and disappointment, and it helps you deal with stuff like trauma and abuse. Rape specifically and sexual trauma is noted as something that Chrysocolla is supposed to help you overcome, help you work with. But it also helps you express some of those fiery emotions. So it helps you express your anger, your disappointment, your creativity, your passion. It helps you tell people what they feel. And in a lot of ways, women are not encouraged to do that. So Chrysocolla is like, no, girl, you speak up when someone does something bad. And I love that about Chrysocolla. And it's a lot about your feelings. I mean, if you feel like you need some female empowerment, then you need it. Just grab it. It doesn't matter who you are. I love that about Chrysocolla. It's a really powerful, creative, confident is a good word, confident type stone. It's also good for any sort of psychic or intuitive work. Pendulums made of Chrysocolla are incredibly popular. Actually, I have a Chrysocolla point that I paid so much money for, like way more than I should have. It's beautiful, but it's so much money. I used that as a pendulum the first time I was learning to use a pendulum in this class where there were people everywhere. And the thing moved on its own, just went in the opposite direction. I freaked out and I threw it. It was very hilarious and embarrassing. But it absolutely works. And part of that is because I wear it every day. It's an everyday wear stone. Chrysocolla works best when you wear it all the time, when you wear it closely on your body. So I have it on a necklace, a pendant, right, that hangs right over my heart. And if you are someone who's kind of looking to exude some sexuality, some female sexuality, Chrysocolla is good for that. I used to use it for that, back in the day, before I went celibate here. But yeah, it's great for stuff like that. That is one of my favorite stones of all time. It's beautiful. A lot of times you can find it mixed with galena. Galena's it's a black stone, but it's got a lot of metal in it. It almost looks like hematite. I prefer it without the galena. The galena, I feel like, kind of dilutes the badass power I get from Chrysocolla. But I mean, it's a nice badass black stone, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. As usual, I will post a link to the blog where you can shop at Richter's for Calendula and Marigold live plants, dried seeds, whatever. And Stonebridge, where you can get some Chrysocolla either in pendants, pendulums, or loose stones. And if you shop through those links, you will be helping out the blog and the podcast. So I would really appreciate it if you guys would check that out. And tell me about your experiences with the Calendula and the Chrysocolla if you guys try it out. And Jane Claire Bradley, if there's anything else that you wanted to know about Calendula, send me a message. I hope this helped. I hope it was sufficient. Okay, so that is my show for today. Let's do some shameless plugs and advertising. So please check out my blog at thefatfeministwitch.com. You can also find me on Facebook at The Fat Feminist Witch. Twitter, it's Fat Feminist Witch, because Twitter has restrictions on how many letters I can use. Fat Feminist Witch on Instagram. And you can always email me, thefatfeministwitch@gmail.com. If you can contribute and support the podcast through Podbean, I have a crowdfunding campaign currently running. You can find it through the support page on my website. So on thefatfeministwitch.com, go to support, and you'll find a link to the Podbean crowdfunding campaign. A few people have contributed, and I am eternally grateful, including a shop here in Windsor called Mystical May Moon. So Ron and Melissa Story from Mystical May Moon are my executive producers, because that is the contribution level that they've chosen. And they actually went a step further and have lent me a microphone, which I'm using right now. And, they said they don't need it back for a little while. So until I get something of my own, they have lent me something. So I'm so grateful for them. And, I'm also doing a dream pillow workshop. I'm doing a dream pillow workshop next Thursday, the 26th, at Mystical May Moon here in Windsor. I'm going to have some calendula with me to stuff in those pillows. So if you're in the area, come check it out. It's going to be a lot of fun. Also on the support page, you'll find stuff like a link to my Amazon store, again, to Richter's and to Stonebridge, where I get affiliate, money and cred. So if you purchase through my links there, I will get just a little bit of money, which goes to help support the podcast and the blog. I also have an Etsy store. And if you're interested in the Santa Muerta incense that I talked about a little bit earlier, you can purchase that from my Etsy store. Okay. I think that's good. I think that's enough. So thank you everyone for coming out. To all you goddesses out there, no matter what your body does or looks like or can or cannot do, you are wonderful and magical, and you might even be an actual goddess. What do I know, right? So thank you for coming out and listening to the Fat Feminist Witch podcast. This is your host, Paige, signing out for an indeterminate number of weeks while I get way more spring sunburns.